Hello, and thank you for joining me here today. This presentation is about you, each of us. It's about our values, which are deeply personal. It's about how to make sure your values are aligned with your actions and what to do if your company values and your personal values are in any way in conflict with or not quite resonating with each other. For those of you who are new to Bright Talk, welcome. This is the People First Productivity Solutions channel. However, it has recently been renamed to more aptly describe what we're looking to accomplish here. So we are now calling this the People First Potential channel on Bright Talk. For those of you who have been around a while, thank you. Thank you for coming back over and over again throughout the years and for giving us feedback and comments that help us to continually improve what we're doing here. And back to those of you who are new, let me just point out a couple of things. You'll notice right below the video here is a tab. It's called Attachments. And we always load up goodies for you there. So please take advantage of that. One of the first things you might want to access will be the slides for today's presentation, in case you're someone who likes to print those out and take notes or keep a record of the presentation. Well, those are all right there for you. I'll talk about the other attachments as they come up naturally in the presentation. I do hope that we have a chance to connect, whether it's here and you're asking questions because you're attending live, or whether it's over on LinkedIn because maybe you didn't attend live and you have some questions that you'd like to ask. By all means, anytime, send me an email or post something to me on LinkedIn. We'll make sure to answer your questions. Or maybe we're going to be connecting because you are someone who wants to follow up. You want to get some additional information about what we're able to do. I'm Deb Calvert. I'm the Productivity Solutions and the founder of People First Leadership Academy. People First Leadership Academy is a new product. We've been running now for about 3 months. And what's going on over there is, in addition to what we do here on Bright Talk or YouTube or elsewhere, it's a place you can go for e-learning, self-paced on your own. It's a place where we can set up some group training if you prefer to have it in a virtual format with all the bells and whistles. Some of the content there is free. Some of it is very, very interactive in a live format. In fact, today I'm doing a presentation. If you are going to be available a couple of hours from now and you're live, today, December 6th, I'm doing a presentation called Introduction to the Leadership Challenge. It's an hour and a half of really fun, really interactive content, and it's an extension from the topic we're going to be discussing right here today, because this topic also has roots in the Leadership Challenge. So either way, be sure and check out peoplefirstpotential.com, as well as being in touch with me. I do so appreciate your comments and your feedback. So how about we get started? We've got a big topic to cover today. This topic is about, as I said, you. It's mainly about you. It's about knowing, recognizing, and living out in your actions your personal values. I'll give you some ideas along the way for how to make that happen. Let me just start by saying that, for any of this to fit together, this alignment, what we have to be thinking about first and foremost is what you value, so that you can have absolute integrity in what it is you're portraying to the rest of the world. The word integrity, I think oftentimes it gets misunderstood. People assume it has something to do with honesty. And, well, that's not exactly accurate. They are two different things. The word integrity means wholeness. It means that what you are saying, doing, believing, it's consistent and it's whole. It fits together nicely to create that whole big picture of what you are and what you're all about. To get to that place of integrity, or when we look at others and measure whether we think they are someone with integrity or not, we are looking for consistency and clarity in what they say and what they do. They become predictable because they're consistent. They're not confusing because they're very clear about what matters to them. And they're whole because what they profess to believe also shows up in their actions. It all fits together, it all makes sense. This ultimately creates a certain sort of credibility. Right? People are more likely to have faith in you, to believe in you, and you're more likely to believe in yourself if you've got that kind of credibility that comes from the wholeness, your integrity. And the reason this really, really matters, at least to the outside world, is that if you want to be effective, if you want to be credible, you have to have demonstrated integrity, that wholeness, because people can never believe in anything you say. They can't believe in your message if they don't believe in you as a messenger. Now, I know in theory, it sounds easy, it sounds simple to say you've got to live by your personal values. Your values, after all, they're simply the things that are important to you in life. So it should be natural to live by them. And yet, so many of us, so often, are not consistently living by our values. Let me give you some examples. And there's no judgment here whatsoever. This is just a reality check because it happens to the best of us. But have you ever found yourself in any situations like these? Um, for example, someone said something or did something that you strongly disagreed with, but you didn't speak up. And later on, you felt a little ashamed that you let it continue. Or maybe you set goals for yourself, but then you failed to meet them, even though they were important to you. Or how about just this big, broad one, which is that your life or your career, it hasn't played out quite how you really wanted it to. Some other observable examples, sometimes people will want one thing, but what they want clashes with what they feel like they have to do or what's practical in the moment to get along. Or for some people, it's that they're so busy pleasing other people that they're not even sure anymore what their own true values are. Now, the reason that all of these examples are so prevalent, right? They happen all the time, every day, everywhere. The reason they're so prevalent is that we just haven't taken time to first figure out what it is that matters most to us. And then, secondly, once we've identified those 3, 4, 5 core values for ourselves, we haven't thought about how to consistently activate them and how to protect them so that we don't accidentally, inadvertently go against what we value. If any of that is ringing true for you, or you think it might be true for other people in your life, don't be harsh. This is just the way things are. We can accept that, and we can also make a deliberate decision to do something different, to aim for this integrity where everything is aligned and it just feels better. It makes more sense to us and to others who observe us and or want to be led by us. Now, let me give you some ideas about how this can be really helpful. First of all, when you know your values and you've worked them out and you're consistently displaying them, it really helps a lot with problem solving. You see, your values, they become your bottom line. Your values become your internal compass, like a North Star. They guide you. They point towards the actions that will be right for you. They help you decide what's right and what's wrong for you, when to say yes and when to say no, where to spend your time and prioritize your attention and energy. And they become criteria in the decisions that you make. You can evaluate problems and decisions up against your values. You know, what we do instead so often when it's time to solve a problem is we think about what would make other people happy or what would make it go away, just make it go away as quickly as possible. We think about ways to just remove ourselves from it, to pass it off to someone else. And those sort of drivers for solving a problem, they often end up causing a situation that's less than satisfactory for us. We walk away with a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. It wasn't our best. It didn't exactly vibe or fit with what matters to us. So instead, when it comes time to solve a problem, if you can think more about what would align with your values, not, not just what would please others, but what would please you, not in the temporary moment, not the feel good, but the values type of resonance. It feels good and often it solves good because it's guided by our values. Well, here's something else to consider. When you are operating with your values at the forefront, you're going to be communicating differently and more effectively. You'll know the things that are important to you, and that's what you'll communicate or signal about yourself. That's what you'll put out there about your values. You'll put out there what's real and true about you and for you because it matters to you. You'll know, and because you know and you took time to work it out, you'll live your values out loud. But let me give you a word of caution here. Here's something that I wouldn't want to let slip past us. When it comes to living your own values out loud and really knowing them and prizing them and demonstrating them consistently, we have to remember to do the same for others, to leave them equal space to know and live out their own values too. The misunderstanding comes when we start to put judgments on values. You know, in values, there is no right or wrong, only different. And no two people are alike, so I cannot expect you and I to have exactly the same values. And if your values happen to be different from mine, well, I need to respect that and honor that, just as you need to respect and honor what my values are and where I'm coming from. But when we know this about each other, when we've identified our values and we can talk about them and we're consistent with them, well, then we don't have to infringe on each other. Instead, we can open up bigger dialogue. We can communicate more richly because now, knowing your values, maybe you'll have a better understanding of why you do things the way that you do them, why you set certain priorities, why you're reacting in a potentially negative way or a doubtful way about something that matters to me. I won't have to take it personally. I can understand because we're coming from two different places in terms of our core values, our root values. And we can be okay with that. We can both be whole with our integrity and our values worked out without it having to be something that's assumed. Now, this does beg a really important question. You might be thinking right about now, yeah, but Deb, we work for the same company. Shouldn't we have the same values because of that? And I think that's a very good question. It's a really important question. We're going to talk about these company values, and then I'll come back to answer that question a little bit more deeply. But first, I would challenge you to think about your company's values. Do you know exactly what they are without looking? Do you have to go to the website or some placard that's in the company headquarters to find those values? And once you find them, are they just nice words? The same words that you could generically find in 10 other companies like yours? You have to really know what they mean. In a company, they need to be defined. They need to be codified so that everybody understands them in the same way so they're not subject to interpretation. And even that isn't enough, not to have true company values that are drivers of behavior, that are common unifying factors between people. To get there, you also have to think about how those values are expressed. In actions, how are those values expressed in the day to day? From the top of the organization throughout every single department, how do you want those values to be demonstrated, to be embodied? And if that's real in your company, how do people know it? What happens? What happens when certain individual behaviors are directly in conflict with the values of your organization? If you say, for example, that you have the highest ethical standards of honesty in your organization, but somebody is consistently, padding their expenses and not showing up on time and wink, wink, nod, nod, doing a few other things that are under the table and signal to everybody that honesty, that those are nice words, but I don't have to be exactly honest and ethical in my own actions. Well, if nothing happens because the person doing that is a stellar technical performer or for any other reason, if you allow those behaviors that violate values to go unchecked, well, your company's values become meaningless. You're signaling to everyone else that words on the wall and behaviors in lifetime don't have to be the same. And at that time, there's really no point in having company values. Because the point of company values should be that we are unified by them. We're attracted to them. We want to work at companies that have values we admire. Your company values can help you attract the right people, the ones who believe in the values that your company professes, but only if the company backs up what they profess with the actions they expect and manage in others. So let's say your company's in good standing. The values are what they are, and they're consistent, and people know them, and people are held accountable to them. So now you might be asking, okay, the company values are really, really strong. The company values are something that everyone understands and everybody is supposed to act in accord with. So, shouldn't we at that point just all adopt those values, believe that we all have identical values, and operate in one accord? And the answer is no, sort of. The answer is, of course, you should all be acting in one accord and upholding the company's values, but it does not mean that your personal values are a direct match. It does not mean that you have to discard other personal values to take the company's values in place of your own. And it doesn't mean that you have to stack up. You've already got 5 core personal values and the company has 5 values of their own. It doesn't mean that you have to have all 10 values as personal values. Here's some interesting research. Now, as I told you, a lot of what I'm sharing with you today comes from the Leadership Challenge, the work of Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. Perhaps you've heard it referred to as the 5 practices of exemplary leadership. Remember, all of that, I'm going to talk about more of that later today, and I hope you can join me. I'll give you more information later about how you can do that, but it's free, it's fun, it's highly interactive, and it's over on peoplefirstpotential.com. That's where you'll find everything that we offer at People First Leadership Academy. But here's a piece that comes directly out of the Leadership Challenge. This research is replicated in a lot of different places. What you're looking at here on a scale of 7 max, what you're looking at is the impact that values clarity, being very clear about your values. What's the impact of that on your commitment to the work that you're asked to do? And you can see here we've got some choices, 4 of them. We've got clarity of personal values, clarity of organizational values, and the lows and highs so we can see where they intersect. Now, this is probably no surprise. The upper right hand corner, when you have clarity of organizational values and clarity of personal values, that's where you get the highest commitment from people. People who have both are more committed to the work they do, even if there's not a direct match between all of their personal values and all of their work values. It's the clarity that counts. And probably still no surprise here, the lowest situation is when somebody does not have clarity on their personal values, but they do have clarity on their work values. Because now there's a tension, perhaps. This is the upper left hand corner. The organization is telling me what I'm supposed to value, but I've never taken time. I've never worked out for myself what my own values are. So these are like clothes that I'm supposed to put on and force them to fit, whether they exactly do or not. And this isn't to suggest that people shouldn't demonstrate your corporate values if they're a member of your organization. What it's intended to point out is if they don't also have their personal values worked out, well, they're not going to be as fully committed. In fact, here's a surprise. Lower left corner, when there's a low degree of clarity in both personal and organizational values, those folks are slightly more committed than the ones who don't have their personal values but do have your values with clarity. Speaks to how important it is to have your own personal values worked out. The first highest was both. The second highest, though, is that I'm clear on my personal values, even if the organizational values are low. This is in the lower right corner. If that's the case, I'm still more committed to the organization because I have my own values worked out and I'm clear about what they are. Oftentimes, when I show this to folks, they're really surprised because they thought it was sufficient to put the company values front and center. And whatever people believed, well, that was just fine. It didn't matter. It wasn't important. But it brings us back to this point we were making earlier about communication. Now that we have all these values that are supposed to unite us, you would assume that we've got something we can communicate about, we can agree upon, we can work from. But what you're missing is the other piece, the personal piece, my sense of belonging, my sense of being ennobled in my own right, to be able to be dignified and respected as an individual contributor. Well, I need you to know me. I need to know me so I can help you to know me and so that we can know each other. And with that, employee engagement commitment levels are going to be significantly higher, which means all the right stuff for your organization, better productivity, customer satisfaction, revenue, profit, they all increase when people are more committed. And retention of people goes up when they're more committed because they feel like they belong and that they're known in the organization. So massive benefits come from this whole notion of getting everything set up so that personal values are not sidelined. Personal values are, in fact, something that you mine for, that you're interested in, that you help people to identify for themselves. Let's take a look at something else. Here are some questions. You might be thinking about what it is that you use your company values to do. Well, hopefully, you use them to define who you are as an organization. And then, hopefully, you use those values to attract people who, if it's not their personal values, at least they can accept or feel very good about the values of the organization. Inside an organization, these are the kinds of questions that you should support people asking. If they have a personal value that seems to be in any way, shape, or form in conflict with the organization, help them to figure that out. Like, for example, sometimes there are organizations where the value is risk taking. This is a cutting edge company. They're highly innovative. They want to stay on the forefront. And so it's a value for that organization to always push the envelope. But in that organization, there are probably people who strongly value safety, security, cautiousness. It's not necessarily that they're risk averse, but it's that they're more like guardians. They are protective and they want to be sure before they proceed. Your company values and this individual's values may be at odds. And that might actually be a really good thing. Sometimes we need people who say, wait a minute, let's take a second look. What about? We tried that once before and here's what happened. Let's be careful. So, having some people whose values are not exactly identical gives you a different perspective. The problem isn't that the values are different. The problem would come if this person refused to get on board with innovations, refused to celebrate the successes that came from those risk-taking adventurous spirits. Right? If this person was so deeply uncomfortable with innovation and was becoming a detriment to the progress of the organization, that's when the values clash would no longer serve either the organization or the individual. But if we can look for the values that are supportive of the company's values and the ways that individuals' values can complement the company's values, well, that's where it's win-win. That's where a mismatch isn't something that you should view severely. It's not something that you should hastily try to move away from. We're looking to bring the best, the fresh perspectives from others in ways that supplement and complement what we already have. Now, of course, whatever the company's values are, of course, they should be respected by every member of the organization. To respect them and to consider them in decision making and interactions with each other and with the public, people have to understand them. What does it mean if an organization says that they are innovative? That's one of those business words that gets thrown around a whole lot. In some companies, in fact, in some industries, innovation basically means new every day because that's survival. They have to be constantly staying ahead of the competition and the emerging technology that forces continual change and improvement. But in other companies, innovation means slow, incremental change. We have an open mind, but we aren't fast to make those changes. So you've got to define it and define what it looks like in action if you want anyone to respect it and be able to get on board with it. At the same time, as we were discussing a moment ago, personal values aren't suppressed, they're not minimized, they're not taken for granted, they're not judged. Instead, you're looking for the complements, you're looking for ways that each individual can bring something useful to the table. When people know who they are, they know what they believe, they know what they stand for, they have confidence. They aren't going to feel like there's something they have to be so protective of. They can be more open to how do my values, although different, complement and support the team. As an individual, you'll want to be looking for ways that your actions can demonstrate both. You see, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. You can both think innovatively and openly while also being a guardian who is protective and sensitive to what has already come before. Your actions and the words you choose would demonstrate both. Hey, I'm really open. I'm interested in learning about this. I just want to make sure that we're double checking and complying with and paying attention to. Both your own values and the company's values get reflected when you start to think of ways that you package them together. Unfortunately, sometimes it does happen that our values are challenged. Somebody asks us to do something that would be a compromise to our values. We have to take that in a measure that is prudent without leaping to conclusions. Let's say, for example, that one of your core values is time with family. It's extremely important to you. You have demonstrated it in every possible way. You work hard during your 40-hour work week so that you can separate from work and spend time with your family when it's not your work hours. Well, you've got a new boss. Your new boss doesn't have family as a value. Your new boss is sending you texts at 11 p.m. and 3 times a day on Saturday, 5 times a day on Sunday, and your family time is being infringed upon. And when you don't answer those texts and emails, your new boss is calling you on it and telling you the expectation is for a more immediate response. What do you do? First, check to make sure it's not a misunderstanding. Hey, I'm working my 40 hours. I put in 110% effort when I'm here. Family is an important value to me. I just want to check, are you truly now expecting me to be immediately responsive on the weekends? And if that's the case, maybe it's time to reevaluate because your own values matter to you in such a deep way that you'll never be able to do your best or be your best if you sacrifice those values for a paycheck. I know that's pretty heavy, but I coach a lot of people, executive level included, who find themselves at those kinds of crossroads. And there's nothing at all I can say, and nothing at all that you can do to have both your values and behaviors that are in conflict with your values. Your family, you're telling them all these years, you're my number one, you're the most important thing to me. But suddenly you start working 80, 90 hours a week. Well, they don't see your intentions, they see your actions. And if your actions don't match your words, they see that you have compromised your credibility. And it's hard then for them to respect you in the same way. I know this is pretty raw to say that. I have experienced this myself. I've experienced it in ways that I'm not proud of. And so I know firsthand from experience, whatever your values are, you've got to be sure that they are really your values. If your actions don't align, you've got to check yourself. Which is the mismatch caused by? My values have changed or my actions are not aligned with my values. Either way, a fix is needed. A fix is needed for you, if for no one else, because you want to keep your integrity, your wholeness, and not have that kind of confusion. But no matter what, values, they're useless without actions. They shouldn't be passive. They shouldn't be words on a wall. They shouldn't be something that you say, but you don't really believe enough to put action behind it. In life, this congruence, this integrity, our wholeness, that is a great big piece of professional and personal satisfaction. It's how people are able to get ahead, not by playing somebody else's game, but by being whole and consistent and credible and knowable, because we all admire people who are clear in what they believe and credible because what they believe is what they do, and we can see it. When we are operating in ways that are very, very consistent, people believe in us. They would follow us more willingly. They don't doubt us because we are someone who now is trustworthy. All these other words, integrity, credibility, they add up to trustworthiness. But if our actions are not congruent, not aligned with our values, remember, people are always paying attention more to what you do than to what you say. You've heard it said this way, actions speak louder than words. So your actions really do matter. Now let me give you, about 7 ways here 7 ways that you can deliberately, on purpose, actively, in fact, proactively make sure that you are aligned with your values. First up, you've got to know what your values are. And if you don't, I'm going to point you to another presentation that's here on Bright Talk. The title has the words leadership philosophy in it. There's a web page that you can go to after you watch that presentation. That web page will walk you through all the steps, the exercises for figuring out your values, for figuring out your personal philosophy as a leader. That's a leader at any level. You are a leader in your own right, no matter what you have as a job title. So you do some work there and you know your values. And then you start to align your actions with your values in these 7 ways. This is also from the Leadership Challenge, which I'll be talking about more this afternoon. I hope you can join me. You align with your values by, first of all, looking at your calendar. Look at your calendar. What does your calendar say about your values over the next 90 days? If you are someone with a high value on family, does your calendar prove it? Does your calendar have time blocked out for family? Does it have you continuing meetings well into the night? Or does it show that you end your days at a certain hour and after that it's family time? Or whatever. Those are just simple examples. Whatever it looks like for you, have you worked it out so that your calendar protects time for values? Let's say you value recognizing, praising, complimenting, positively encouraging other people. Does your calendar have events where you do that? In addition to the regular organic ways that you do it day to day, are there some special celebrations that you've put time toward so that people know just how important this really is to you? Here's a place where a lot of values get challenged. It's in critical incidents. These are moments when the pressure's on, the stakes are high, there's not any real time, you've got to act. Do you stay aligned with your values? Or do you go along with others even if what they want to do is not aligned with your values? In those critical incidents, you're having a conflict with someone, let's say. Do you stick to your values of kindness and of dignifying others? Or do you explode and say regrettable things that you don't really mean? In those critical incidents, sometimes we're not at our best. So when our values are violated by ourselves, when we violate our own values, at least use those critical incidents as an opportunity to teach yourself something, to figure out how you could do things differently the next time because you didn't mean to do it that way this time. Think about the stories they tell. Do you tell stories about your past or about other people or in the moment to illustrate what your values mean to you, to illustrate how your values come to life? As an organization, this is something that should routinely be done. It really helps people to understand what values look like in an organization when people are talking about those values in action. They're telling stories, they're giving awards, they're praising behaviors where people stayed aligned with the values and demonstrated them in some tangible, observable way. Think about the language that you use. I worked recently with someone who said one of her values was for young women to be confident and believe in themselves. That was something she wanted to do in the world, to make a difference in the world. And she really valued creating ways for others to grow in their own confidence. But I noticed over time in working with her that her language, her choices of what she would say, it was very self deprecating. And she believed that was because of being a very humble person, not wanting to take a lot of credit, not wanting to have the spotlight on her. But she was so self-deprecating so often that I had to ask her, "What example are you setting to these young women that you work with who you want to have them to have confidence? You don't sound very confident. How are they supposed to work this out? How those two things, feeling confident but not sounding confident, How does that calibrate? And sure enough, she went and talked to some of those young women, and that's exactly what they said once prompted and given permission to talk about that. And she realized that her own choices and how she was presenting herself did not show an example of confidence. In an organization, it's not a bad idea to have some measurements that reinforce your values. These are measurements that are practical. They're not subjective. Like if you have a company value around um, fun, well, how do you measure fun? Unless it's on an employee engagement survey, something tangible where people are evaluating you for your fun, well, then it might not be fair to hold up a manager for fun level. But if you can get a practical, tangible measurement that reinforces those values on a regular basis, like the employee engagement survey, like the stay interviews that you do, whatever it might be, right, then you have an opportunity to work on the value and how people are perceiving it. And last but not least, I do think it's a good idea to recognize performance, your own and others, that demonstrates values. When people do things, even though they're hard, but they do things that are aligned with their values, well, and then they get recognized, that signals to everybody else we're serious about this. We mean it when we say these are the things we value. When you tell someone, I really appreciate, despite the push for innovation and rapid change, I really, really appreciate that you give me time to check back and reflect and be the voice of a devil's advocate before we rush headlong into change. It means a lot to me that you let me play that role because it's something that I value so strongly. And when you do that, you get rewarded with more of the same. And people respect you for speaking up and for visibly demonstrating your values. This was the last presentation, I should say, the last new presentation on this channel for 2021. There is one more that's a replay a little later this month, but we've posted all the presentations here on Bright Talk for the People First Potential channel, all of the regular monthly ones that will be coming in 2022. And they will be part of a series called Why Wait to Be Great? So we'll be talking a lot more about topics like this that are personal and also apply within organizations for helping other people rise to their full potential. I don't want you to miss, if you have time this afternoon and are attending this session live on December 6th, I don't want you to miss the introduction to the Leadership Challenge. It's not too late to sign up. It's happening from 12:30 to 2 o'clock Central Time today. And you can go in the attachments and find a link directly there. Or you can go to peoplefirstpotential.com and see not only that offering, but lots of other offerings, more coming every month over there at People First Leadership Academy. As we wrap up this session, I want to thank you for being here. And I'd like to ask you to take a moment to review, give me some comments, tell me what you liked, what you would like to see done differently in the future. I really always so appreciate when you give me that kind of feedback. Happy New Year if we don't talk sooner.